Yo, 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 what is going on, everybody? Isaac Mashman here, and welcome back to your favorite podcast, Chase the Vision with Isaac Mashman. This is the podcast that is all about helping you become a more capable individual through me sharing my experiences and knowledge in business, life, and personal growth, and also having other people and other fantastic guests come on and share their own experiences and knowledge in their own fields of expertise. Now, today, I don't really have an interview for you guys. But if you notice on the title of the episode, it is episode 100. This is the 100th episode of Chase the Vision with Isaac Mashman. Whenever I started the show in June of 2019, number one, it wasn't even called Chase the Vision. It had a different direction and it's went through a lot of different evolutions. But today, here with me right now, I have two of my closest friends and people that I go back with years. I'm talking prior to the podcast, prior to Mashman Ventures, prior to a lot of these different things. And I couldn't be more grateful to have them on today for the 100th episode special. But again, I have no idea what the rest of this episode has in store. All I know is it's going to be a great conversation, a great time of reflection. And so let me go ahead and introduce the two amazing people that I have with me right now. Number one, we have the chief consultant of Mashman Ventures and the host of the Eric Chow Empowers podcast, Eric Chow. I met Eric back in 2019 and started out as a guest on his podcast. We had that synergy, and sometimes that synergy just speaks for itself. We maintained contact. Last year, when I wanted to grow my company, I said, Eric, let's bring you on. Let me train you. Let's work together and let's grow together. And so super honored to have him with us today. And then we also have Mr. Michael Johnson of Tea with Mike. Now, Mike is somebody who is my opposite in the fact of rather than drinking coffee, he drinks tea. So I know you're probably surprised that I even have him on this episode to begin with. But hey, here he is, and I'm super excited to be having this conversation. Mike and I go back, I think, even farther than Eric to 2018, maybe one of the first couple hundred people, the first 1,000 people I connected with on Twitter. We maintained the relationship, and I have seen this man's growth so much so through his podcast, through his interviews, through his conversations. And he's actually had some really high level people on his own show through Twitter by chance. And so, Eric, Mike, what's going on, y'all?
I'm good.
I
Thanks
think
for having me.
I think I speak for both of us. We're excited to be here, huh?
Yep, yep. Knowing all of us, how much we all talk and how our conversations go, this is going to be fun. We're going to have to try not to over talk one another, but
Yeah,
good
for
luck
real.
on that one, right?
Yeah, Mike, you want to say hello first?
Sure, first, so thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Obviously, I'm very passionate about connecting with people, networking, storytelling. I was excited to meet both of you guys through the great networking tool of Twitter. Obviously, Isaac first, and then Eric. And it's been just great to watch how our digital friendship has evolved over a number of years, even though we're going in slightly different direction. We all share that kind of like synergy and that energy, and hopefully one day we'll get to meet in person.
Speaking of which, is it true that you and Eric have been plotting to have me pay for the hotel room and the dinners and everything when we meet in person? Whose idea was that? Was that your idea, Mike, or Eric?
And that was the chief consultant's idea of Mashman's adventure, Eric
Oh,
Chow.
okay. Eric's like,
It's
let me
true
write
though.
this off on the company's taxes, huh? All right, Eric. I see how we're going with this.
Exactly, because I'm not the one writing the taxes. This is great.
Eric's like, you don't mind credit card? Why, Eric? Why is my Amex ran up 20 grand? All right, yeah, that's the mood. That's the energy. No, it's cool though because we started out just as people who didn't have our shit together at all. Like, Eric, you were a student. You were just now starting your podcast. I think I was like episode 5 or 6.
You were episode 5, but actually we first started talking about having you on my show 2 days after I launched it.
Crazy, wild.
So I had like one episode up.
Uh, And then, Mike, you have been obsessed with tea for as long as I've been obsessed with coffee, probably even before that. So it's cool to see your growth, though, because your shows went from just this general idea of having conversations, but you've stayed true to the reason why you started the show. And you've had how many episodes now?
Just 155.
155. Wow. Jeez. So, I mean, we're going to be there later this year, going into next year with Chase the Vision. But you've stayed true, and you've also launched your own business on the side as well, marketing agency, if I remember correctly. And I mean, we all have different things going on. When I connected with you guys, I didn't have the podcast, I didn't have the book, I didn't have the company, I didn't have anything figured out. And it was a time in my life where it was chaotic. It was my infancy stages of business, and now we've all matured in our own rights with our passions and careers.
Very true. No, very true. And I think we all think about this all the time, especially when we talk to each other, how crazy it is looking back over how we connected, right? Because I mean, I don't know. I think when you and I met, for example, Isaac, I had zero clue that I wanted to do anything in the business world. Mashman
Yeah.
Ventures didn't exist.
Yep.
Now look at us, right?
Yep.
And similar situation with Mike. I mean, a lot of people that I ended up meeting in the podcasting world, and the number of conversations Mike and I have had about podcasting, and also just planning like long-term different things, because I think that there's a different level of conversation. You can talk about your podcast with anybody, but when you have a fellow podcaster, it's very, very different. And Mike is certainly my senior in terms of podcasting, and so I've been able to pick his brain a lot in terms of how I should do my show. And so he's certainly helped me grow, and I've had the great fortune of giving him a couple of my thoughts. And it's just amazing to see how all of us have progressed in terms of everything that we've got going on, because we sure as hell had no idea that was going to happen when we were getting started.
For sure. And then just that whole concept of just working together. Like we all have like slightly different goals. Some of them are close together and some of them are far apart. But just really how we get what each other is trying to do, and just really being that supportive mechanism. I know, Eric, you've recommended lots of great guests, including you, Isaac, actually, lots of great guests for the Tea with Mike podcast. And I know me and Eric have had a lot of unscripted late night conversations on how we can continue to develop our podcast. And then Isaac, you were one of the very early guests on my podcast, and you really helped me from a confidence perspective, and when I didn't really know what I was doing. And I think everybody needs that one person that they can lean on as they find the direction and the purpose they want to go in life.
Yeah, well, on Facebook, it reminded me of a memory. How Facebook always reminds you of your old self and how much and how little you didn't know, right? And it reminded me, I think it was last month, of our interview that we did back in 2018. And I'm looking at the office area, and I'm like, number one, I was recording in a chair, and I had, I think, my camera set up on it might have been a tripod, or it might have actually been like a plastic case. And I'm looking behind me, and I'm like, this is the bedroom that I was in at my grandmother's house figuring this stuff out. And I'm like, my office right now that I'm working out of in my apartment is probably twice the size of that entire bedroom. And I'm like, God, Lee. And then I'm listening to myself speak, and I'm like, it was interesting because the way that I used to speak and carry myself was in a confident way, but I was almost trying to convince myself that I was confident. Truthfully, I was trying to convince myself that I was confident, because I had to shape myself into this confident person, because I really wasn't confident. I was self-conscious. I was worried about things. And so it's like I remember that was when I was in network marketing. I'm like, yo, what's going on, everybody? Isaac Mashman here. And I'm holding up my phone and I'm recording, and I'm like, if you want to get on a webinar, let me know and I'll send you over the link. And I'm like, good God. And I couldn't even get 3 or 4 people on for the webinar. Yet Eric and I and Mashman Ventures hosted one the other day, and we had a turnout of 24 and 30 people and 50 signups. And Mike, I've seen you go from being that very quiet guy, like very self-conscious in the way of you talking to, and I watched it happen, which was funny, because from the time we first started talking to the time you got your 20th and 30th guest on, the next time that we got on a one-on-one call together, I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, literally, because I'm like, you acted so different compared to our previous conversations. What was that big point for you? Like, what made you go from the quiet Michael Johnson to, hey, I'm Tea with Mike, and then now you have no issue blasting out, you need to listen to my podcast on every single Twitter thread on the platform?
I don't. So for me, it's taken me a long time to kind of find my purpose and my direction in where I want to go. Quite frankly, I've always loved people. I've always liked opening my mouth. I always like talking to different people and being that person in the room that wants to get to know everybody, which obviously has its pros and it has its cons. And I think discovering this whole digital world of entrepreneurship even and podcasting really like piqued my interest. I've done all of the traditional schooling for years of post-secondary and theater and media and communications, but I've never been that person that wanted to sit in an office cubicle at 9 to 5, 8 to 5, collect that paycheck and work for somebody else. And I think that's ultimately comes down to my personality and my energy and stuff. I'm just not fit to fit into people's structure and what they deem acceptable in those types of environments. And I think I still think I went on the right journey in the sense of discovering who I am. And it was just by chance that I took a risk on a class assignment for the podcast, and I went against kind of the grain, like the instructor with a PhD thought it was a terrible idea. People in my classmates thought that I shouldn't be doing it because it was a cop-out for the assignment. But somehow I pushed on with it, and I started not knowing what I really wanted to do. And the first episode of the podcast was with someone that just took a chance, and we did it in a study room, and like I forgot to turn the lights on, and my hair's like a frazzled like mess, and
what's changed?
The audio, right? Gotta be consistent, right? And so it's just this evolution of this big journey. But what it came down to was not giving up, finding some supportive people along the way, like you guys, and just really like going against the grain and developing that self-belief as I go. And now I'm trying to look at my own journey and now trying to help others when they might not have that initial confidence to take that first step.
Yeah, and then Eric, I mean, I'm drawn and I'm thinking about some of our earliest conversations and you not even wanting to get involved with business. And this is the funny part, because I remember we were talking, I'm like, so what are you doing this for? And I'm this guy who's like, if it's not in business and it's not making money and it's not doing like the X, Y, and Z, I'm like, what's the point? And so I'm like, Eric, what's the point? And you're like, I really don't even think that I necessarily want to get involved with business right now. Maybe in the future. You're like, I think maybe that would be cool. And then we ended up doing that podcast, the interview, and then we go and launch our own show for a brief period of time. Then we're like, okay, we'll get away from the Facebook group and get into a different area. And I don't want to get into all of that stuff, but we started the couple projects together. And then I remember, and I hope you don't mind me bringing it up, but I'm bringing it up anyway. You know, I'm going on a walk at night, and I remember getting a call from you. You're like, hey, I know that you were in network marketing, and you're like, what's your perspective on it? And I'm like, well, here we go. And I ended up listing off, pros, cons, negatives, things that I learned, what I learned from it, and for the most part, it was positive. I'm just like, be smart with what company you're getting involved with. And then, down, the road, you ended up getting involved with a company of your own, which you're still a part of, on top of, now you're helping me build out Mashman Ventures as not so much of an entrepreneur of sort, but more of an intrapreneur of, prior to doing this, special in this podcast, we were on a call talking about, the next steps for the company and a way for you to generate, your own revenue, for us to increase value add. So it's like, whether you liked it or not, you got involved with business. And I don't know if that's fate or destiny or, just going and taking a chance and saying yes to the things that are coming your way. Mike, can you imagine if you said no to that project, or you made instead of doing a podcast, you did any other kind of project? Like, how different would things happen? And it's like our journeys and our experiences can be changed and dictated and completely redirected with one simple decision, one opportunity that we say yes to.
Yeah, it was very much a by chance kind of thing. And it's funny, like reminding me of that kind of first conversation before we even hopped on the show. I mean, just to give context to everybody else who's listening, like I said, we connected with Isaac maybe 2 days after my show, asked him to be on my podcast. And it was funny because I remember going, listen, I would love to just get more established before I have you on. Like, y'all just let me use some of my friends right now and, have a couple of episodes. And Isaac was like, nah, no need, no need. Let's go for it. I'd love to help you get started. And so similar to what Mike was saying, it was very much like a confidence booster because that was the first episode I did where it was a stranger, never met the person before, right? So, Isaac, same day, gives me his phone number. I'm like, what? That's kind of weird. But maybe a couple days later, we hop on the phone, we had that conversation, and then a couple days after that, we had the podcast. But yeah, I think it was a very much by chance situation where I never ever felt like I think when growing up, I was always trying to figure out, okay, what is my path going to look like? How am I, what is my purpose? What am I going to, going into college, what am I going to major in? What's my career going to look like? What's my life going to look like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I found was, you know what, let's just have fun. Like starting this podcast for me, which was sort of the first major project that I did, well, second, but we won't go into that. But starting that podcast, I just wanted a place to do some storytelling. I wanted to have some self-expression. I wanted to have conversations with people that I couldn't otherwise have. There was something I felt that there would be something different when I said, hey, let's hop on a podcast episode versus let's just chat, So that's all I wanted. It was a very like simple sort of reason. And I wanted to be able to have those conversations that were interesting and meaningful and hopefully adding value to somebody. And connecting with you gentlemen and connecting with many other people started to help with that. And it was very similar situations when it came to getting into business. I never ever said, I really want to be in podcasting, or I really want to be in business, or I really want to be in PR, or I really want to be in etc. anything. It was just something happened. And I felt that it was a good thing to do. And it was very much by chance. I always think about the thin threads that led me to where I am, because I wouldn't have met Mike if it weren't for you, Isaac. If we hadn't kept in touch, Isaac, I mean, I don't know if my show would continue. I never would have met Mike. We wouldn't be in business together. I might not even be in business, period. But it was all these like spontaneous little moments.
Well, all those things add up too over time, and
Yeah.
then I've oftentimes questioned that as well. I'm like, growing up, I was that good student, and I'm like, I'm going to go to college, and I'm like, what the fuck am I going to college for? I had no purpose of going to college aside from having freedom away from my family, and like for the first time ever, I'm like, cool, I'll go there and I'll have my freedom for the first time. But I wanted to get involved with marketing. I considered, and I went through so many different pivots with my own, and I've never put it into the perspective like this and thought about it this way. But growing up, you go through 6, 7, 8, 9 different career changes that you want to go down. You're like, I want to do engineering. I want to do NCIS. And literally, I wanted to be, the Naval Crime Investigative Unit. And I'm like, my grandmother like raised me out of the cradle practically watching crime shows. I'm like, all right, cool. Maybe that's why I have a dark sense of humor. But anyways, growing up, I wanted to do this, that, and the other. And it's like, I went through just as many different pivots with what I wanted to pursue professionally and through my career as I did in business, the different businesses that I went through. Because you go through these different things and you don't know how one leads to another until you look back in hindsight's 2020, and we could sit here talking about the possibilities and what ifs all day, because there's really no telling, but they're all linked together. And then you finally have something in a point in your life that you were seeking, and I just recorded a video talking about, you're going to find what you look for. And it's like, you're looking for the solution or looking for the next thing. And it just so happens that when you find it, it, and then you go after it. And I think that's really exciting. I know that all three of us have had a podcast for years. And I think that it would be really cool to go into a conversation about what are some best practices for a podcast? What are some of the biggest things that somebody should know when starting a show? And Mike, I'd love for you to start out.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So number one, definitely self-belief. Like we just heard in my own story, it took a lot of me, like I'm not happy with how things are going. I haven't found my lane, and I tried this podcasting thing almost on a whim. Like when I started, I didn't know what a podcast was. I didn't know where I could upload it to. I didn't know how to edit it. All of these little minor details that I discovered along the way. So number one, self-belief. Number two, ask lots of people. Start with a lot of people that you know and really try and branch out. What's the worst they can do? They can say no, and you haven't moved forward and you haven't moved backwards. So you might as well pour the oil on as many different people as you can, like right off the back. I know for me, it was intimidating interviewing you, Isaac, on my podcast the first time because I was still new at it. I didn't know what I was doing. Right, my show started improvised, and then it moved to a little bit more structure because I'm better with structure. And so, definitely take your shot would be my second piece of advice. And third would be consistent. A lot of people, I don't know the data, but a lot of people like quit after 1, 2, 3, 10, 12 episodes, and that's too early. That's too early in the journey. You're starting from nothing and you're trying to build something fruitful and amazing in whatever lane it is. And if you don't give it a chance to grow, then you don't know where it's going to become. So those are probably my top 3 pieces of advice.
Mike's like, pour oil on everybody. It doesn't matter. Start the fire. Smokey the Bear would hate you, dude.
Who's that?
You don't. Canadians.
God. I mean, well, British first, but.
Okay, so Smokey the Bear is the whole thing. Like, man, I can't believe you've never heard of Smokey the Bear. YouTube can prevent forest fires. You've never heard that?
No, I haven't. That was not part of my childhood. Whether
Eric,
that's
was
right,
it part
whether
of your
that's
childhood?
wrong, wasn't
Eric,
part of my journey.
You've never heard.
I've heard of it, but it was not part of my childhood. No way.
Wow. You never got like a pin if you went to a fair or something that, and you're in California, Eric, I would think that you, out of everybody with forest fires and stuff, would get the you too can prevent forest fires.
You know what? Maybe I just don't remember it.
Wow. Anyways, all right. So Eric, going back to podcasting, what are some of your top tips for people who are wanting to start a show or are starting a show, or maybe they've been doing it for a little bit of time? Yeah. What would you tell somebody who's in that situation?
You know what? It's interesting to hear Mike's perspective, especially since he is my senior, and it's interesting to see how much we agree. Because I think I remember when I considered starting my show, I asked every possible question you could ever ask yourself about, I don't know how to do this. How am I going to figure this out? Like every potential doubt or question you could have ever asked, I asked all of them, every single one. And then, I ended up waking up one Friday morning and feeling really spontaneous. And I started my show that day. I recorded the first episode. I uploaded, I announced it. I did everything. I figured everything out. And just started because I was feeling spontaneous. And I realized in that moment that literally 0 of the questions mattered. Either I would figure it out later, it literally didn't matter, or I simply could not know the answer until I did it. For example, the questions of like, are people going to listen? I don't know. Put something out first, man. Come on. Like, oh, if I do this calculus, maybe if I, no, there's nothing that's good. So I had to just put something out there and see what was going to happen. And I think people will be surprised. I think people will be surprised at what can happen in just those first couple of days. And so I would just say, start, have fun, laugh. I agree with Mike. I don't think that you can figure it out in the first 5, 6, 7 episodes. I think the statistic is most quit by 7 episodes. My attitude was 100%. Listen, I ain't average. I don't know if I'm going to like this podcasting thing, but I ain't going to be average. So I'm going to do at least 10. That was literally my attitude. I'm like, I'm making it to 10. And then if I want to quit, I'm going to quit. But I'm doing a little bit more than what people would normally do. And I would just have fun and laugh and just try to keep it somewhat casual. Yes, there was a reason for doing it, but just trying to have fun, figure it out as I go. I think I was still figuring out how to edit by like episode 18. I still hadn't figured out how to edit yet. I was still like, oh, I can do it like this. This is so much easier than what I was doing last episode. Like I was still doing that at like episode 18. Am I still great at editing? Absolutely not. Sometimes people talk to me about, hey, Eric, you should try this and this and this and this. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? I still don't know. But you know what? Just having fun, laughing about it, not taking yourself too seriously, not taking yourself as a joke, of course, but not take yourself too seriously. Um, Give it time to figure it out. And I agree with Mike, connecting with people, reaching out to people, having those initial conversations will likely come from people and people you want to talk to. It may come from people you don't know super well or haven't talked to in a while, but you're like, hey, I think if I have a really, if I tell this person, let's do a podcast interview, then some interesting conversation will come up. That's how my show got started. And you'll be surprised at the people who will say yes, to be honest.
And then looking back, I bet you both can probably agree with me that a podcast isn't as difficult as you would
No.
have thought. Most things that I found in life, and I'm at this point now to where I'm like, damn, why did everybody make life so complicated? Because yes, there are ups and downs and such, but I'm having a difficult time now because I'm like, this is all easy. And that
Yep.
might be just because I don't think it's the capability of being able to learn. I think it's more so just looking for ways to get better and ways to improve. Because I'm looking around me right now, I'm like, number one, I could start 5 businesses off of my one business. I could break down, like Eric, if we needed to, we could break down Mashman Ventures into Mashman Podcasting, Mashman Publishing, Mashman this, Mashman that. We could break down every single thing that we provide for a client in 5 different companies. I'm like, this, it really isn't that difficult. Or with a podcast, for example, it's like, yes, there are a lot of moving parts, but if you don't let yourself get overwhelmed with how many moving parts there are, it's really not difficult. It takes time, right? And I agree with everything that both of you guys have said and some really great points. And I would say if I was to add on anything, it would be to go into it with an intention behind it. To say, am I looking to build my credibility? Am I looking to build my business and to generate leads? Am I looking to simply have conversations to promote a cause or promote something that I believe in? And I would go into it. I'm glad that you brought up the statistic. You took my fire, Eric, was to go and, not pay attention and not be another statistic, because most people stop after that 7 episode or 20 episodes, however long it is, and they never average more than 20 listens per episode. Yet if you were to stick with it and get into momentum and increase and get into directories and build out the awareness, you're going to see more and more people consistently listening to your show without you even knowing that they exist, right? And personal branding one-on-one. And then from there, like the opportunities that a podcast can generate for you too. In my own life, I'm thinking of so many different opportunities that have come about. It's really wild. And this is about life, going and seeking out those things and those ways to, get into the right rooms, to get into the right conversations. And like a podcast would be a great way to possibly do that, or getting involved with business, So no, I mean, great points, everyone. I'm just going to look at you guys and wait for you guys to have a conversation.
Dude, I love awkward silences, so I will be very comfortable.
Oh, okay.
I'll just sit here. I'm good, man.
Eric's like, longer the silence, the better. All right, cool.
That'd be really funny if we just like disappeared for like 5 minutes.
And then just come back.
The listeners like, did my audio go out? Hold up. Rewind. Fast forward.
Skips forward. This is the segment that we would typically have an advertisement, but rather than have the ad there and waste your time and your energy, we're just going to leave a long, awkward silence for you to contemplate what we've thought about and to think about your life and your decisions.
There's going to be like a tune, and it's going to be like tea, coffee, chow, coffee, tea. It's going to play on repeat on a loop, and
Great.
It's like you remember back in the day where you had like that neon cat, or like what does the fox say? And you had these super annoying ass YouTube video, like baby shark, and you're like, stop it. We're going to do that. It's going to be tea, coffee, chow. Tea, coffee, chow. Tea, coffee, chow. I'm a message Mitchell Hindsight if he can turn this into a song. That's how we're all blowing up right here, boys.
There we go. We're going viral now.
Oh man. So let's talk about social media and the power it has, though. On a serious note, not too serious, but serious. No, social media is one of those things that, we're able to have this conversation. It's funny because Eric, you and I are building a business together, and you're my right-hand man for Mashman Ventures, and we've yet to shake each other's hand in person.
True.
Ironically, yet honestly, we feel like we have,
Yeah.
And that's why it's also important to take those online digital relationships into the physical realm when you can. Like, there's going to be a day where we go and we meet, whether that means we go up to Red Deer, Alberta, Canada, and we go and sip tea. And Mike's like, you don't want to come here. Or he's either saying that or you butchered the name. I don't know which one. Mike, what are you saying?
I don't think you want to come here. I think you'll be disappointed, but I could be wrong. And that's part of the joys of life, right? Discovering new environments. I don't know.
Ooh, this is a kind of tree I've never seen. Is that an insect I've never saw? Like, oh, okay. I feel like that's probably what Red Deer is about. Nature.
So yeah, well, there's a lot of nature, and it's going to be like, how many Tim Hortons can you count within the same like square radius? Because there's a lot of Tim Hortons.
Okay, so well, I mean, hey, I like coffee. That might not be a bad thing.
No.
There we go. I'm going. I'm going. No, but there will be. What was that, Eric?
Sold. You just sold the flight ticket right there.
Literally, Willy Wonka's golden ticket for me. But no, there will be a time where, I mean, Eric, you and I are going to be meeting in August whenever we do a company trip for Mashman Ventures, which I have no idea when that date's going to be. We're going to have to talk about that to figure it out, but that's the spontaneousness of this. And there's going to come a day where we all hang out and, we're like, yo, it's crazy because we've been friends for years. And now we've taken that relationship, and sometimes that's like those are the best relationships you can have. And I'm going to 2 weddings in October for people that, one of the people I've met in person, but I met him through social media, and then I met him in person, and then now I'm going to be going and meeting him again in person, flying to Oregon for his wedding, and then it's going to be the same thing for the other person. I've never met him in person, but I'm going to be going to his wedding, because you can establish those healthy and strong friendships and relationships, and then you go, and I mean, coming from the guy who flew across the world to France for a girl I've never met and spending a month and a half in France, to going and meeting my current girlfriend, and I've never met her in person. And then I flew out, and fast forward a year and a half, it's like, why the hell am I in Arkansas? But it's like, that's kind of the situation. I think it's cool. So yeah, I mean, social media is one of those things that, it's connecting us in a way that we've never been connected before, but it also has some drawbacks.
Certainly.
What are some of the drawbacks that we can all mutually agree on that it has? I think, like, it's easy to be on your phone and be disconnected from conversations that are right around you, right?
I think it goes back to what you were just saying of being intentional, because it's very easy to, like, if you're not intentional and you just end up using social media randomly, then you're just going to be consuming content. You're going to be just kind of wasting it. And sure, you'll get some laughs out of it. You'll learn some things. It's not a complete waste, but there's definitely better things you can do, and there's ways to get something more out of it than whatever you happen to get out of it, right? And so I think using social media, especially having conversations where, hey, let me be a little bit more intentional. Maybe I want to, if I was just getting started at 18, just wanting to connect with people. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I'm just going to connect with people. I have no idea. If you're building a business, maybe you need to connect with potential people who are going to be buying from you or supporting your business, or maybe they help your business grow in some other way. Maybe you're connecting with people like that. If you have a podcast, maybe you're connecting with potential guests. Maybe you're connecting with fellow podcasters. You want to get on their show. Maybe you're connecting with somebody who might want to sponsor your podcast. Maybe you're connecting with somebody who just might listen to your podcast and they just like the kind of topics that you talk about. Being a little bit more intentional, being able to have that when you're talking to people and when you're consuming content, when you're creating content, anything that you're doing, I think is a very good shield against that point of, it's very easy to just get sucked into it.
Or distracted, for that matter, too. Yeah. Like, and this is one of the drawbacks too of building a business online. You're like, you can go ahead and you go from messaging somebody or uploading a piece of content to getting stuck on the explore page and being like, what the fuck? How long have I been here for? And now you're looking down at your watch and you're thinking about, damn, I wasted an hour going through Instagram, and you're like, man, I should have been doing X, Y, and Z. And so it's like having that awareness too is very, very important. Mike's shaking his head. I bet Mike gets stuck on TikTok, huh?
I don't spend much time on TikTok, but I was going to add to the conversation by saying, for me, I have to try, and I'm still learning, is trying to find that balance between being purposeful and intentional with the time that you spend online, doing all of the things that you do to hopefully build a better future for yourself, but at the same time, I love like theater. And since I've started doing the podcast and the pandemic, I haven't really had that many opportunities to do things physically in person that I'm passionate about and I love to do. And there's not that much going on in my city like on a regular basis, so it's very easy to get stuck in my apartment digitally online. And so personally, I'm trying to work towards connecting with more people in my local community, getting back involved in the theater, for example, and really understanding that you can have connections with different people for different reasons. Most of the people that I connect with locally gonna be on my podcast. Maybe not, but that's okay. And we can talk about other things like about their business, or whether we've met at a place where we have a mutual hobby like karaoke singing or the theater. So it's like you guys said, it's about being purposeful, intentional, but being okay with switching off and embracing and experiencing what's around you just as much as the online platforms. So that's probably what I'd add.
I see it now. Tea with Mike on Broadway. Big lights.
Well, I used to want to be an actor, and I always struggled with the realization. I did a lot of shows, but I never had the vocal ability. And so one of my earliest career dreams, you mentioned about wanting to, you experienced a bunch of different career aspirations. I did want to be a Broadway actor at the very beginning. Yeah. And the podcast was the happy medium of knowing that I don't possess the greatest vocal ability in that sense, but there are lots of other creative outlets for demonstrating my passions and the things that I love to do, right?
Actually, you know what? I just had a thought on that. I find that like Isaac was saying earlier, in retrospect, things tend to make sense, right? And when I think about we were having this conversation a short while ago about how these things just happen and it's all by chance. But I think that when you look back sometimes and you think about the things you cared about as a kid, you'll find that it actually does line up with some of those by chance situations, right? You had no idea how it was going to work out, but somehow it does actually connect. I was talking to our head of web design at Mashman Ventures. His name is Dexter Washington, and he's putting something together for me. And he's having me write something about how I got into the PR and branding industry. And it got me thinking about, okay, how did I actually end up here, other than like the story of, and going into, okay, what is my connection to PR? Because I never, ever sat down and thought about PR. But when I started thinking about like my childhood and things growing up, I was like, wow, I was actually thinking about this stuff a little bit here and there. And I'm like trying to connect the dots, see how it all makes sense. So I think that, when you look back in retrospect, things make sense. And I think that sometimes when you listen to people's stories, you're like, wow, that's so cool how they figured all that out. No. We just did stuff and then we figured it out later.
And it's funny because apparently we've all been in this nostalgic retrospective energy, because the other day I was thinking about some of the earlier interests that I had when I was younger. And it's like, I've always kind of been interested in psychology and human interaction, in the sense of, if I do this, how is this person's response going to be? So I'm able to predict, and this is something that I don't know if it was like a gift or a skill, but I have the natural ability of predicting how a person's going to respond without them having to do it yet, based off of my own response to them in previous, ways of, what do I know about their speech? What do I know about their belief system? What do I know about how they think or how they act and how they behave? And then now I'm able to make an assumption based off of what they're going to do. And 9 times out of 10, it's right. Or going in, I used to be the kid who would read, like the Lysol spray, and I would read off like all the labeling, and I'd read it, and I just would literally read the label. I'm like, let me read off the chemicals. Let me read off what I'm spraying in the air, what cancers I'm spraying. Like, let me read all of this stuff. And I paid attention to the labels. I paid attention to the branding. I paid attention to all of that. And now fast forward, it's like, that is my business. And that is what I'm specializing in, or reading and having a genuine interest in psychology, to where I'm researching the halo effect for a new value add we created for our clients. And I'm like, man, I'm not bored with this. This is really, really intriguing. Like, I could literally go and like go back to school in the future and get a bachelor's in psychology just because it's interesting. But then I look back and I'm like, I was always interested when I was younger. And so it's like they do tie in together, right? I think that's a interesting thing to point out. Now, Mike, we know that you're about tea. We know that you're a tea dude. Everybody knows I'm a coffee guy. I don't have coffee with me because I've already had like 6 cups today. But Eric, what the hell are you, dude?
You know what? Since we're talking about Chow, I'll tell you 2 things about me. All right, when it comes to food, and you know what? I had this conversation with your girlfriend once.
Wait, what?
Literally. Okay, so this is. I remember talking to her somehow, and I think I just randomly, I don't know what we were talking about, but I asked her, "Yo, does Isaac eat a lot?" And she goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "Dude, no wonder we're friends." Because obviously we've never hung out in person. So yeah, anyway, here's a couple facts about me when it comes to food. So I used to say that my stomach is like a black hole because listen, I eat. I thank God every day for my metabolism because it's a miracle that I am not severely overweight. Thank God for my metabolism. I do work out and everything and I eat very well, but yeah, I don't know how that works. So I eat a lot. My goal whenever I go into a buffet is to bankrupt them. Like I don't know how much they're charging me, but I will make sure I get my food's worth. I went into this one buffet one time. It was really weird. They said you could only get 1 plate. I was like, what kind of buffet is that, dude? Like that doesn't make any sense. But man, did I get a plate? I mean, that was a plate. It was a tower on that thing. I put it right in front of the lady who was like taking my card or whatever. And she's like, you can't share that with anybody. Like that's, you can't get like 2 people on 1 plate or something. I'm like, no, you crazy. I ain't giving this to 2, 3 people. No. I'm gonna devour this whole thing. And then I'm gonna walk over here and take some more. And you won't even see me. Which I did. So yeah, anyway, I don't
So
know.
Chow with Eric Chow, huh?
I eat the food, man. I don't even have time to pick out the drink. I'll have a soda here and there, some energy drinks here and there. I drink a lot of water, but man, when I sit down for a meal, I just eat the food.
We should have an eating contest because, like you, I also have a good metabolism, and I
Oh,
can
the
eat
3
a
of us?
lot
Let's
of
go,
food.
dude. Let's
Yeah.
go.
And I don't work out as much as you, Eric, admittedly, but I'm still not too bad from a physical appearance
Let's
perspective.
go. All 3 of us. This is gonna be great.
It's funny though because whenever I go to like a good like Asian style buffet or Japanese style buffet that has sushi or nigiri or sashimi, I'm like, I don't know how y'all stay in business. Because well, and typically, not even from a monetary standpoint, but if we wanted to break it down, and this is how I perceive things in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, if we were to go to a normal sushi buffet, I probably literally just racked up a bill of like $200 because I'm like, it's $8 a roll. I'm like, well, I just got like 10 rolls, and so now, all right, this bill would be steep. But at a sushi buffet, you're putting everything on your plate. You're like, man, this is great, and then you have the wasabi, you have the ginger, you have the soy sauce, you have all these different things, and you're like, life is good. Those are some really good moments. When we do the trip later this year, Eric and Mike, I'm sorry to leave you out, but I'm going to find a good buffet in Miami, the Miami area that we can go to, and then Logan can have us run laps afterwards because Logan Mandeville is going to be like, yo, y'all got to work this off. So
Logan, I want to
we
see
gonna need to
this.
figure something out to kick him off to the side.
Eric or Logan, you're not invited.
We love you, Logan.
Mike, what were you saying?
I was just saying, please make sure you capture it as
I can't hear you.
content. So
Yeah, I can't hear you.
I can watch. I'll have my
Oh.
own plate of food, and then whenever it gets uploaded, I'll be like, "This is funny." Except I don't have Logan telling me about my fitness. So
Yeah, Logan can't make fun of him. Damn it. That's
We can always make that happen. No, Logan, I need you to text this to this number. No, we would never do that to you, Mike. But okay, so what is your favorite tea? Out of all the teas in the world, what would be the number one? Is it like Earl Grey, chamomile, chai? Like what is it?
Gray is revolting. I absolutely hate it. It's just not for me. I don't know. just doesn't hit. Just does it. It's just not my cup of tea. If we're being simple. So my favorite type of tea, and hopefully they listen to this podcast because I think it can make for a great sponsorship opportunity, is Yorkshire tea. It's a strong black tea that's kind of in its original form. It's made by a brand called Taylor's in Harrogate. The connection there is I used to have my hair cut near where they made all the teas. So we go back way back, and I probably drink like four or five cups on average a day. And, for my recent content, that puts me over 1,000 cups of tea a year. And the amount of times that people ask me what my favorite type of tea is, isn't that a great branding and promotional opportunity for them? It's so talk about synergy and energy. I'm just saying.
Need to go ahead and chop this podcast up and send them over to them. So I have a very serious question to ask you, Mike. Like, this is probably the most serious thing I've ever asked. And I can't do it. What is your perspective on Southern iced sweet tea? Here in America, we have this thing down in the South that's called, you're going to have sweet tea that tastes like syrup because of the amount of sugar in it. What's your perspective?
Well, firstly, I've never had it, so maybe we could do some follow-up content. Secondly, on principle, and this is only opinion based, of course, that just sounds I don't know, just bad for your teeth. Just going to leave you feel all like unproductive and gooey and sticky. I think tea should be very refreshing. I think that it's one of the best ways to start meaningful like conversation, like podcasting. Obviously, you got the tradition of like English tea, and people meet up and they sample different cakes and savory items over tea, and it's very long lasting. I just think the sweet iced tea would cut the conversation short, if I'm being blunt. That's my gut. I'm just going with my gut based off the question.
I've never had a conversation over sweet Southern iced tea that's been overly productive. So got a good point. Just saying, like I've never had a conversation with somebody sipping sweet iced tea and it's like, so let's talk about business or conversations. It's normally having to do with a bunch of food that makes you feel bloated and you don't do anything and you just all complain about how bloated you are and you want to sleep. So America. Yeah. So Eric, man, what is your favorite kind of food to go ahead and have this conversation? This is a typical conversation that I wouldn't have on a podcast, but I'm enjoying this because this is entertaining.
I actually think for the listeners, this is an extremely good insight into the friendship that the three of us have. Like, this is a very good summary of how our friendship goes. We have these like really insightful conversations about podcasting and business, and then we jump to stuff like this. There's no particular one food that I would say I like. I love Italian cuisine. I had the pleasure of visiting Italy a few years ago, and I had a blast there. Thank God for my metabolism. As an Asian, I definitely love Asian cuisine. I'm part Chinese, part Burmese. And so I love Asian cuisine, a lot of different, Asian cuisines, of course. But yeah, man, I just eat, dude. I don't know. There are a few things that I don't like, of course, but yeah, I would say Italian and Asian would be, if I had those two cuisines every day, I'd be a very happy man.
So I know what I'm going to do. So I already have a bunch of these different ideas to get you for your birthday coming up later this year.
Okay.
What was that?
Okay.
Well, you already know some of the different ideas that I have. I'm not going to disclose them on the podcast because that'd be funny, but I won't. I'll spare you the embarrassment there. I'll wait until I do an Instagram post instead. But I want to do a T-shirt that says "Thank God for my metabolism."
This is a great idea.
This is going to be your next
face
business.
on it. Put my face on it.
Yeah,
I think
this is
great.
This is going to be the reason Eric Chow leaves and departs Mashman Ventures so he can start his own clothing line called "Thank God for My Metabolism."
This is actually, I will wear this T-shirt loud and proud. This is a great idea, Isaac. You should. This is
okay.
Phenomenal.
You could do socks, you could do underwear, you could do hoodies, you could do everything that just says "Thank God for my metabolism," huh?
I don't
Okay.
know about all the other clothing, but the
So
t-shirt.
anyways, let's talk about business. What is one of the most important things when it comes to business? What is one of the fuck?
Want a piece of chow?
Oh my God. I love this.
So, what is one of the most important pieces of business advice for somebody who is in any business, any field, anything? Like, if we were to do a quick segment that says business tips for beginners, what would it look like? What would be your number one tip, Eric?
Uh, it's got to be networking. I honestly can't think of anything else. That's just the absolute first thing that comes to mind. You got to be networking. You got to be meeting people. I start one-on-one. Obviously, yes, you're going to be, creating content, doing all that stuff to build your brand, build your credibility. There's a lot of things you can do there. But number one tip, where do you start is you start talking to people. You start letting them know about what you've got going on. You also start getting to know what they've got going on, because that's important, because that's also going to tell you how you can support them, right? Whatever they've got going on, maybe they're a client of yours, maybe they're just a friend who there's going to introduce you to somebody, maybe their audience is actually your clientele, and so you can do a partnership or a collaboration together, and then you can also leverage that. Or maybe, I don't know, it depends on whatever they've got going on, but you don't know that until you talk to people. So just getting to know people, meeting people, would be easily my first tip.
Brilliant, brilliant, Mike.
For me, kind of a little bit like Eric. Let's say you had a 3-year plan to start a business. If I was going backwards now, for the entire first year, I would just get involved with local community events, give up some of my time. I'd meet as many different people as I possibly could, both physically and then also digitally. I mean, if you held new conversations every day, that's over 1,000 different people that you would now know as part of your network. And then you might be able to identify where there's some gaps in the market or what they may need. I mean, it may not lead you to starting another business, but you might find initially that perfect job or that perfect opportunity helping someone else build out their dream whilst learning some of the hard skills needed in business. And then you can use all of that knowledge to eventually branch off and kind of do your own thing. So it all comes down to giving back to your community, establishing yourself as that guy is there for everybody else. Then hopefully there's someone that's like, what can I do for you? And that's potentially another way of looking at it.
Very, very creative piece of advice that I wasn't expecting, honestly. That's something that not really anybody has ever said. And I think that that's an important aspect of building a business, even on the online space, is going into that physical realm and having conversations, going to city council meetings, going to, community events, nonprofit things. Like personally, the times that I'm the happiest when I'm out and about is when I'm doing something for a nonprofit. That was a part of me growing up, going to Boy Scouts and doing cleanups, or going and being a part and active at church and opening up the door for an old woman, for elderly people. Like everybody loved me back in church because I was like the sweetest thing. Like they're like, oh my God, you're so sweet. Walk the lady to the car, put the walker in the back and send her off. Bye. Bye, Carol. Bye, Esther. Bye, Esther. But I mean, I think that's really, really
Shout out to
important.
Carol and Esther.
What was that?
Shout out to Carol and Esther, who are hopefully listening to this.
Yeah, right. Well, none of them had the name Karen, though. Honestly, I don't think there was ever one Karen at church. Wonder if that's a coincidence. But no, Mike, I absolutely love that. I would say, honestly, for anybody getting involved with business is to remind yourself of the importance of personal growth and learning from other people. Like reverse engineer another person's success. This is something that I did a lot of. I used to reverse engineer what somebody did to become successful. And I would say, what principles, what things, what techniques, what strategies can I rip apart from their own journey, from their process, and make it my own? If it worked for them, chances it worked for another person, and then the chances are it'll work for me. And then from there, it's like I got on Twitter for the first time, and that was like my number one platform. Ironically, I'll give the man credit. I don't agree with most of his stuff, but Gary Vaynerchuk. He got on Twitter first. He built out his audience on Twitter first. And I was like, shit, I could do the same. I started my first podcast because he had a podcast and it worked. And then I did all of these different things and understood the power and the benefits behind them, even though I wasn't aware of it starting out. And speaking of the garage sailing Gary V, I don't dislike the guy. I disagree with a lot of what he talks about now, but it's funny because I started out and he was like the number one guy who I studied for like a year straight. And then I'm like, I feel like I graduated elementary school because I feel like there are levels to content. And I felt like he was like the elementary education of business. And I'm like, let me go to middle school now and then, graduate. But Mike, you ended up interviewing him, right? And tell me about that process. How did that come to be? And how was that interview for you and being in the room with him? Because no matter your viewpoints on the guy, it's like he is a celebrity. He's somebody who is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least 100 million, which I mean is better than anybody else in my life. So it's like you have to give him credit where credit is due. What was that like?
I guess it was a very crazy moment. Obviously, we've already talked about it earlier in this podcast episode, but just how I has started from zero, was kind of figuring it out as I went along. I met you guys along the journey, which really helped me develop as a person. And then actually, the pandemic was a blessing in a lot of ways because he started Tea with Gary V, and I didn't even know he'd started this, but then my community on Twitter told me that, hey, look, Mike, Gary has started the show. Did he like copy you? Did he do this and that? And I was like, I don't think he copied me. I don't have a bill for his lawyers, so let's not say that. But what it did do was it kind of sparked my curiosity for what Tea with Gary V was all about. So I went and checked it out and stuff, and I was like, this is great, but everyone's really going in like, what can they get for me? Like, what can I get out of this experience? And no, I'd listened to a bunch, and I'm like, nobody's ever asked Gary like what's his favorite type of tea. And I'm like, that's bizarre considering it's called Tea with Gary V, and it goes to the point about doing your research and trying to find those different strategies for helping elevate yourself to a different level. And I got to give you credit to Isaac, because like, do you remember when we were on Twitter and you helped seal the deal because someone posted something? I commented and like you retweeted it and that type of thing. Do you remember?
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and so then I developed how the strategy, kind of how I was gonna get on this podcast. So I started making tea-related content and pitching it at him in different ways. It was some tea facts that turned out into tweets, and then I got this opportunity to be on. And I've never been more terrified in my entire life. You guys both know, because I talked to both of you around this time. You know, Isaac, we jumped up. It was like an hour call. I had a big list of things I was gonna do, and you're like, no, this is okay, but you probably got like 5-6 minutes, like 2 minutes if he's in a bad mood or he has to like run somewhere. You've got to really like hone in on what you're asking. And I remember, I mean, that was good development for me, because you asked me a series of kind of like questions that made my mind think a little bit more analytically, which is not typically how my mind works. So anyway, fast forward, get on Tea with Gary V and stuff. I got really lucky I was like the third person on that day. A couple of great people before me really kicked his energy up. I was glad to be in the middle, because it's usually when the most people are watching, not right at the end when he's got to rush to something else. And so I got my like 6-7 minutes with him, and then I like executed that I want to beat him. I was freaking out, but I guess it worked and stuff. So then he was like, yeah, you can meet me, come to an event near where I lived. And that was it for like the longest of time. The pandemic delayed it twice. And then on the day of the event, like after several postponements, I was so blessed that it still happened, even at the height of the pandemic, one of few events that actually made it. We got there 2 hours before. I was in Edmonton with my family, going to the event, doing some other stuff. And I get this text message from D-Rock, his like cameraman, and he was like, yo, we just touched down. We're at the hotel. You'll have 10 minutes with Gary in the green room. And I'm like, what what are you talking about? I just thought it was an opportunity to meet him versus actually recording a piece of content. And D-Rock was like, oh, I'm so sorry. We just default into thinking everybody wants to interview him. And I'm like, damn, well, I can't let this opportunity go to waste. I've never done an in-person interview. I don't have any equipment with me. I'm like, shit, I hope I can cuss. That's like the first time ever. I'm like, I'm freaking out. I don't want to let this go. And so I somehow persuaded like D-Rock to like capture it. And I remember like walking into the dressing room, he's looking at his phone, and he was just like, it was me and this other guy named Bobby, and because he was doing something too, and he was just like, hello, gentlemen. It was crazy like how down to earth he was. The room was silent and stuff, and it was just crazy how generous he was like with his time. It was a thing that he had to fulfill after the meeting for a sponsorship reason, but he held it off so we could get like the full like 10 minutes and stuff. So always grateful to like him and his team and all the people that are part of it. And it was just left me with goosebumps. I don't know, like,
Mike, are you about to break down in tears? I feel like you're about to cry. I feel like this is such like a moment right now to where you're going to start crying. I'm going to start crying. Eric's going to start crying. And it's like, we're just going to
be at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, just at the end before it gets to that point.
Yeah, but anyway, I can't remember what he asked me, but it was just, I just had goosebumps the entire night. His team upgraded me to VIP. I was sitting in the second tier, so I got to meet him like for the second time for a photo. And this is a true story. I wish it was captured, but sometimes the best moments are just moments that are not captured on camera too. I remember when I was standing there, like to get my like photo and stuff. I met up with some other people by accident that I didn't know were going. And you said, Mike, you know what? I really enjoyed that time that we spent together. And that's in the top 3 moments probably in my life. And it's something I'll never forget. But at the same time, knowing that I can go from 0 to accomplishing now, it's that hunger. It's like, what can I do next, right?
I love that. And that's one thing you can never fault him for. He's that down to earth guy who gives up his time. Like that's something that I still have respect for him for. Cool, dude. That was really, really cool. And you actually led into the next question that I wanted to ask to kind of wrap this conversation up. And that's what's next. What's next for you two? What's next in life? Eric, you're over here doing that long Eric Chow sigh. So you got something on your mind. What's up?
I don't know, man. A lot. I think, I think the 3 of us have had countless conversations about what the future is going to hold. And obviously we don't know exactly what is going to happen, but just looking at the past couple of years and the way things have gone, and me just thinking about 18 years old, I had 0 clue what I was doing with my life, and looking at where I am, looking at, of course, what I'm doing with my podcast, and, having those conversations over there, and, what we're doing with Mashman Ventures, what I'm doing outside of all of that. I don't know, man. It's just a lot going on, and very, very excited about whatever is in store. And building businesses is a lot of fun, surprisingly. I really didn't think it would be, but it is.
That's a misconception people have. They think that business is supposed to be like some boring ass thing.
Yeah.
It's not. It should never be a bore. It should be something that excites you, something that you look to as entertainment almost. You look to and view as a game. So, dude, can't wait.
I think part of it, I'll just add to this, was I think sometimes maybe it's scary or that because it's too technical. I think sometimes we think too technical about it. And hey, there are some very technical people out there. So hey, that if that works for you, that works for you. That's great. But me, I think if I make it too technical, and I still find myself falling into that now that I've developed some skill set, and I still find myself getting too technical with things, and I'll talk to somebody, and they'll be like, dude, don't worry about it, just go. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Just reminding myself like, hey, let's not make this too technical. Let's not make this too complicated. Things can be complicated, but shoot, man, this can also be really, really, really simple. So yeah.
A balance between the technicality side, the logic and emotion, right? And I think that there has to be some degree of balance to that in business, because you get too emotional, your head's in the clouds, and you're not getting anything done because you're always thinking. You're too logical, you can actually think yourself into cripple to where you
Yeah.
don't do anything, right?
Yep.
And so yeah, I mean, a lot of different things to take into account there. And Mike, what about you, man? Like when you opening up your own tea line?
That would be so cool.
Wouldn't it? Cough, cough, looking for some investors. Cough.
That Mashman Investments is looking real nice there. I don't know.
Y'all are trying to drain me of all my money.
Goddamn right.
So definitely keep developing out the podcast. Like want to get to 10,000 podcast downloads this year. Really trying to accelerate it a little bit. Try maybe even if it's not much. Maybe get like 1 or 2 podcast sponsorships, even if it's just for a single episode. Really test out that water and stuff. There's only so much you can read on Google before you kind of just got to experiment and figure it out. Definitely try what you mentioned in the webinar the other day, which was a really great webinar, and I came along to support you both, and especially you, Isaac, and really thought you delivered. Even for someone like me, and I know there were some other people in the room, there are a few steps forward from starting from scratch, but you can always like learn from each other. So yeah, definitely some local podcast sponsorships. I want to do some traveling. Traveling was low on my bucket list, but we've been stuck. I realized now I haven't gone anywhere in 8 years because of the pandemic and because I was in school, and just really reprioritizing what's important, and then also getting involved in my local community. Hopefully do some theater again, and really get my name out there locally, because I'm in this weird space where I started the podcast and even the business in a pandemic. If you're connected with me and you follow me digitally, you know who I am. But if I walk down the street, 80% of people don't know who I am, which might not necessarily be a bad thing, but that's just a weird predicament of how the journey's gone, right? So those are some of the things I would say, and just really looking to connect with more people every single day. Even since the webinar, I started connecting with some people that I didn't know in the webinar to see what they've got going on. And it might not be anything more than a conversation, but I don't think you should always like put pressure on expecting something from every conversation that you've got. Sometimes it's nice just to check in on a infrequent basis to see what they've got going on, right? So that's what I would say.
Brilliant, man. I'm excited for that. And travel is something that I think all of us are looking forward to. I think that's one of those missing pieces. As like, oh man, but it's been a great time having this conversation with you guys too. A lot of laughs, exactly what I thought, poking fun at one another. This checks all the marks on what I would want 100th, episode special to be like. Tea, coffee, and chow, baby. Tea, coffee, and chow. So with that being said, do you guys have anything else that you wanna say to wrap things up? Where can people find you? All that fun jazz that always comes at the end of a conversation where we say goodbye.
Okay, sure. As soon as my mic's off, I'll carry on. So just first, congratulations to you on 100 episodes. It's no easy feat, as it takes a lot of work, and we won't get off sidetrack, but just congratulations. I'm going to say it publicly for the first time. I appreciate both of you guys' friendship. Isaac, you helped push me out of my confidence, helped develop my confidence, and really helped me figure out sort of where I was going in life. So I can never not thank you enough for that. And I just want you to know that I'm thankful and grateful that you both, and you too, Isaac, that you're in my life. And people can find me if you just Google Tea with Mike, you'll see my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, websites. And if we're meant to connect, we're meant to connect. So that's all I'll say, because people will find me if it's meant to be, right? So I won't go on a long spiel about promoting myself on a very special day for you.
No, come on, Mike. I'm grateful for you, brother. I received that. Eric?
Yes, absolutely. I'm thinking exactly the same way as Mike here. Congratulations on 100 episodes. That is absolutely incredible. Yeah, and of course, incredibly grateful for you and your friendship, and same with you, of course, Mike. but and all your support countlessly. I mean, guys, I think when you connect with people like Mike and Isaac and you get to know them on a more personal level outside of just like the conversations on social and things like that, you realize the kind of people they are. And these are both gentlemen who are constantly thinking about, how can I help the people I know? That is something I've noticed about both of these guys. So I really appreciate both of you for that. Yeah, if anybody wants to find me, Eric Chow Real, pretty much everywhere, ERICCHOW Real. And of course the Eric Chow Empowers podcast. But Isaac, thank you, my man, for having us. It was funny. Mike and I had a call, and we were joking about let's see if we can get on episode 100 for Isaac's show.
Yeah, it was an unscripted conversation. It was a very last minute impulse thing too, wasn't it?
And then Mike was like, I'm gonna just actually text Isaac about this. And then Isaac, you called me the next day like, yo, what is this about? About being on episode 100. And then you said yes. I was like, oh, well, that sounds great, man. So we do appreciate it. We're honored to be your guests for this 100th episode.
And part of the wider Chase the Vision community and family. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I appreciate that and appreciate both of you. And Eric's like, I will promote everything about me right now. No, just kidding. The complete opposite of no, I'm just playing.
So the Instagram enough.
If you want to work with me, it's Chow Ventures, not Mashman Ventures. No, I mean it's good, and I think that this is just the beginning for a lot of different things, and I'm happy. I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to what's next in a lot of different ways, and it's good. It's good. So here's to 100 episodes, and here's to 100 more. Happy and grateful for both of you guys. All right, guys, we just wrapped up filming and you just got done listening to episode 100 of Chase the Vision with Isaac Mashman, the podcast that is all about helping you become a more capable individual. Through our conversation today with Eric Chow and Tea with Mike and Michael Johnson, I know that you guys got some laughs, got some knowledge, got some insights, and hope that you are now going to apply it. If you've been listening to the podcast for any amount of time or think that you got any amount of value today, I ask that you pay the fee, you pay it forward, and you send this episode to somebody else in your life. It could be a business partner, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a friend, a family member, somebody that needs to get off their ass. Send them over this episode, and be on the lookout for new episodes coming every Monday and every single Friday. Much love.